Hey everyone, in this lesson we are going to be looking at how to install GodotSteam inside of Godot. So here I am inside of an already existing project. This is essentially just a little 2D platformer game that we have here in Godot that we're going to be implementing our Steam systems into. Now you can of course use any project you wish. If there's a game you're already working on, then feel free to use that one, or feel free to start with a blank project as well. Okay, we are simply using this one as just to have a bit of visuals and gameplay already added. So to begin installing GodotSteam, which is going to allow us to interact with the Steamworks API, we want to go to the top of the screen here and navigate over to the Asset Library window. This is essentially going to allow us to search for and install Godot add-ons, which are basically plugins that can add new functionalities to our project. In our case, we want to go to the top of the search bar here and search for Steam. Okay, and you should see there are a number of different things here, but the one we want is going to be GodotSteam GD extension, and then whatever version number you are using. Okay, and make sure it is by grams. So we're going to click on that, and then we are going to go down and select download. And this is going to begin the download process. And once that is done, it is going to show us all of the files that will be installed, and we're just going to click install. And then once that is done, we have a little success window appear. We're just going to click OK. Now, to finalize the installation, we are just going to go ahead and restart the editor. So do that, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I've gone ahead and restarted the editor. So now if we go over to our file system, you should see we have a new add-ons folder. Now all of the plugins that you are going to install in Godot need to be added to the add-ons folder, as that's where it knows to then navigate and read from. And inside of this we should have a GodotSteam folder. So we now know that it is installed. Now in the next lesson we are going to be looking at setting up our Steam controller and how we can initialize our client. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Hey everyone, in this lesson we are going to be looking at how we can actually connect our project to our Steam application. Now this is done through initialization. Now what we need to do is go ahead and create a brand new script, which we can do one of two things. We can either attach this script to a node and have it run as a sort of game manager. We will call this one Steam controller. Or we can create an auto-load script which gets run in the background when our game is running and is independent of any nodes or scenes. And I think we'll do that one. Because since our Steam controller is going to be running basically throughout the entirety of our game, we don't really want to unload it when we change scenes or have it dependent on a certain node existing. So what I'm going to do is go up to Project Settings, and then here we are going to go over to the Globals tab. Now here I'm going to go ahead to node name and enter in Steam controller and click Add. This is going to go ahead and create a brand new script called Steam controller. I'm going to go ahead to my scripts folder, and I'm actually going to go ahead and create a new folder here called Steam, and this is just where we're going to be storing all of our Steam related scripts. There we go, call it Steam controller and click create. And now it should be added to the globals list here, basically meaning that at the start of the game, this script is going to be run. Now we can close out of this window, go to our scripts folder, go to Steam, and open up that Steam controller script. Now, before we continue, do make sure that you have Steam currently open on the account, of course, that is connected to your application, because you actually need to own the application in order to run this correctly. Now, if you don't currently have a Steam application, or you're waiting to see how to implement Steam into Godot before you go ahead and make that $100 purchase of the application, then we are going to use basically a game that every Steam account has that is hidden by default, and that is known as Space War. Now, Space War is a game that you can download and play on Steam, but Valve added it to Steam as a way of testing out Steamworks, okay? It is a game that allows us to basically test out every functionality from initialization to loading achievements, to stats, to all of those things that you'll eventually want to connect to your real game. So in this example here, I'm going to be using the Space War application, which again, every Steam account has by default, and it has the ability for you to go in and modify the achievements and stats and everything else. And I'll show you how we can actually access that in just a moment. But first of all, what we need to do is inside of our Steam controller script, we need to create the init function. So we'll go func init. Now, init works in a very similar way to the ready function. Okay, ready gets called when the node the script is attached to gets initialized, whereas init basically gets called when this script is first created in memory. Okay, and since we don't really have a node the script is attached to, init is the recommended method. As well as for initializing Steam, init is also recommended. Now, the ready function also works in auto load scripts, but init is probably just a better practice. Now, inside of here, what we want to do is we want to write down Steam to make sure that we actually have the Steam or the GodotSteam add-on installed. You can see it pops up and it's in green, which means it's successful. And then we want to go .steam init ex right here. Now, we need to give it two parameters. First of all, a boolean for retrieve stats. Now, when we initialize with Steam, we want to basically pull in all of the stats that we have with this game. Now, by default, you might not want that. You might want to access those at a later time, but generally, I'd say we keep this to true as we are eventually going to be working with the stats and with the achievements, so it'll be good to pull them when the game is first initialized. Then we need to enter in our app ID. Now, every application, every game on Steam has a unique ID. Now, if you've gone ahead already and created your Steam game on Steamworks, you should have access to that app ID that you can enter here. But since I don't currently have that set up, I am going to instead use Space War, which, like I said, is that built-in app that every Steam account has and is there for testing out the Steamworks API. Now, the app ID for Space War is 480. And now if I go up and play my Steam game, we should see that, well, nothing happens. And that's of course because, well, we don't actually know if it is running. But if we navigate over to Steam, you should be able to see that you are now currently playing a game called Space War. So that should be working, and you should see this on the Steam app. Now, with this initialize function, it also, if we hover over, you can see it actually returns a dictionary. Now, this dictionary contains a bunch of useful information that can tell us if we have connected successfully or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable here called response, and this is going to be of type dictionary, and that is going to equal the function here. So basically, this function is going to return a dictionary and store it inside of this response variable. Then what we can do is simply print out this response variable. So if I save that and then press play again, let's look down in the output. You can see here this variable has two values, a status, which is an integer, and verbal, which is a string. Now, status is basically going to tell us whether or not we have successfully initialized. And this is going to be 0 for success, which is what we got here, 1 for if there was a failure, 2 for if we cannot connect to Steam, and 3 for if the client is out of date. And verbal is if there are any errors, it will be displayed here. So for example, if I go ahead and just change my app ID to some random number that I don't own in my account or have access to, then we're going to save that, press play, and you can see here we have a status of 1, meaning there was a failure, and the verbal is basically a connection failure. Okay, so we know we did not successfully connect. But if I change that back to 480, which is Space War, save that, press play, we have 0, which is a success. So we are now successfully connected to our Steam application, which is great. Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at how we can have access to some of our user information, okay, or information about the application. Because when you're running your game, you might want to know a large number of things, such as what is my Steam username? Are we currently logged in? Is the game running in VR? Is this player VAC-banned? What language has been set up for this game to run in? These are all different things that we can access, which is basically pulling information from our Steam client. So, What we're going to do is first of all get the one that you probably want to access, and that is our username. How do we get our username? Well, I'm going to create a variable here called username of type string, and this is going to be equal to steam.getPersonaName. Now, if we print out that username, we should be able to see that down here in the output, we have our Steam name printed out, which is great. Now, there is also a way of accessing your profile avatar, but that requires a few more steps, and we'll be looking at that in the next lesson. But what else can we actually do? Well, in many things with the Steamworks API, we require what is known as a Steam ID, which is essentially a unique number for each account, and that is how we basically recognize one account from another with their Steam ID. Now, we can get that in a very similar way. So if I create a variable called Steam ID of type int, this is equal to steam.getSteamID. Okay, just like that, we can then print it out, Steam ID. And if we save that and press play, you should see that we then have our ID printed out here. Again, whenever in the future we want to access specific things from players, if you have a multiplayer game, for example, you'll be needing to differentiate one from another. We don't do that with our persona or our username, okay, because usernames can be the same, whereas IDs are unique. So do make sure you keep a hold of the Steam ID somewhere, or at any time you need it, you can simply call steam.getSteamID. Now, there are also a large number of other things. I'm actually going to go ahead and just paste them in here. Essentially, we can check to see whether or not we own this game on Steam by checking steam.isSubscribed. We can check to see if we are logged into Steam by checking steam.loggedon. You might have certain things in your game run differently if the player is logged into Steam or if they are not. If they are not logged into Steam, they might not have access to achievements or stats or those things. Also in Steam, we have the option of setting up a game launch option, which you may have seen that before. Essentially, it's just this little input field where you can type in some different commands, which the game can then read and basically change how the game launches. Okay, that is how we can access it here. We can check to see if the game is running on a Steam Deck with steam.isSteam running on Steam Deck. Likewise with VR, we can check is Steam running in VR. Now you might want to check to see whether or not your player is VAC banned, okay? Because if your game is using the VAC services, or if you just want to know this information, you can check is VAC banned. And then we have two language options, okay? We can basically get the current game language, which is essentially what the user has set their language to Steam as, and same thing for get Steam UI language, which is the language they have set for the Steam application, okay? So you can then use this to basically automatically detect what language you should have by default for your game. So these are just a few of the many different functions that we can call. You can find a lot more on the GodotSteam website. But in the next lesson, we are going to look at loading in an avatar, because at the moment, we have all this information, but we don't actually have a way of displaying our profile image. So in the next lesson, we'll have a look at that. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at how we can actually load in our Steam avatar, which is basically our profile image. Now, you might want this if you are having a game with a Steam account connected and you want to display their username, profile image. If you're having a multiplayer game, you probably want to be able to fetch all these different users' images so that you can see them on a leaderboard, for example. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new texture rect. And for this, I'm actually just going to go to my player scene here. Again, depending on what project you are using, just find an appropriate place for this image. So I'm going to go to my canvas layer and I'm going to create a brand new texture rect. Okay. I can then probably increase it in size a little bit here, and I'm just going to move it over here. There we go. I'm then going to rename this one to Steam Avatar, and then down here in the inspector, I'm going to create a new script, and I'm going to call this one Steam Avatar and store that in the appropriate folder. Now, the way this works is we are essentially going to call the getPlayerAvatar function. We provide it with the size that we want to fetch, basically the resolution, as well as the ID of the Steam account we want to fetch. Now, Once we call that function, that is not going to return to us the image, rather it is going to call a signal once that information has been downloaded to our computer, and then we want to basically connect to that signal and then run the code in that function. So let's go ahead and set that up. We're going to start by creating ourselves the ready function right here, and then we're going to create another function. This one is going to be called onAvatarLoaded. We're then going to have 3 parameters. The first one is going to be called user ID of type int. This is just going to be the user whose avatar this is. We then have avatar size of type int. This is going to be the pixel width and pixel height of our image. And then we have the avatar buffer of type packed byte array, and this is going to contain all of the data for the image that we then need to convert into something we can use in Godot. Okay, so we have that function there. Now what we need to do is inside of the ready function, we need to connect this function to Steam's avatar loaded signal. So here inside of ready, I'm going to go steam.avatarLoaded. Now this avatar loaded signal gets called once we request for an avatar to be downloaded from the server, and once the image has been downloaded to our computer and to our Godot project, the signal gets called. So we'll go .connect, and we'll connect that to the onAvatarLoaded function right there. Now next what we need to do is we need to call steam.getPlayerAvatar, and this is how we actually fetch that. And you see here we need to enter in 2 parameters. First of all, a size and then a Steam ID. Well, for the size, we can go steam.avatar, and then if we go underscore, you can see we have large, medium, and small. Now in terms of resolution, small is 32 by 32 pixels, medium is 64 by 64 pixels, and large is 128 pixels. So I'm just going to go medium for now. We can then go comma, and to get our Steam ID, once again, we can just go steam.getSteamID, just like that. And then let's go down into the onAvatarLoad function and just print out something just to make sure it's working. So here we'll just go avatar loaded, save that, press play, and down here we should see it says avatar loaded, which is great. Okay, so we are successfully fetching our avatar from Steam of this specific player ID at a medium size, and then the onAvatarLoaded function is calling. Now, inside of here, what we're going to do is a 2-step process. First of all, we need to convert this data that got sent over, the avatar buffer, we need to convert that into something that we can use in Godot, which is going to be an image. So, and an image is basically, well, a data type that contains a picture, an image. So I'm going to create a variable called image. This is going to be of type image, and this is going to be equal to image.createFromData. Now with this, we need to provide this function with a number of different parameters. First of all, the width, which is going to be the avatar size. The height, which is going to be the avatar size, because remember this is a square image, so the width and the height are going to be the same. We then need to provide a parameter for whether or not we want to use bitmaps, which basically make it so that it creates multiple different versions of the image, lower and lower resolutions the further away we are, to prevent the pixels from kind of blending together and glitching out a little bit, but we don't really need that for an avatar. That would mainly be used for textures, so I'm going to write down false. We then need an image format, and for this we are going to use image.format_RGBA8, okay? And then finally we need to provide the data, which is that avatar buffer, like so. Now, this is a pretty long function. Again, we are calling image.createFromData. We're giving it the width and the height, which is the avatar size that got sent over. We are then saying false because we don't want to generate bitmaps. We then give the image format of RGBA8, and finally the data, which is the avatar buffer, and that contains all of the ones and zeros needed to build our image. Now, we can't assign this to be the texture property just yet because an image is not a texture, okay? A texture is basically a type of image that can then be rendered in-game. So what I'm going to do is create another variable here, call this one image text. This is going to be of type image texture, and this is going to be equal to image texture.create from image. And in here, we simply provide that image that we generated in the line above. And then finally, we can set this to be our texture property. So here we'll go texture equals image text. Okay, so we are then assigning on the text direct here, the texture property here. So now that that is all done, we can save this and press play. You can see here we have the image successfully loaded in. Now you can see it is a bit blurry, and that is because we are using the 64 pixel size. So if I change this from avatar medium to avatar large, we should see then that the resolution is a lot nicer. Now, again, with these resolutions, let me just go ahead and paste them up here just so we can have a look. So again, avatar small is 32 pixels, avatar medium is 64, and avatar large is 128. Now, why would you want to be choosing between these? Why don't we just get one size fits all? Well, if you're creating a game where you might have dozens and dozens of these little avatars on the screen, you don't need to waste resources and waste memory in holding 128 pixel images. Rather, you can instead use 32 pixel images. Whereas if you might have a profile screen where you want to have a larger focus on a specific player, then perhaps you might want to use the larger avatar size. Okay, so it really depends on your use case in which of these you would use. So I'm actually going to go ahead and shrink this image down a little bit. In fact, let's go and make it a specific size. So if I go down to transform, I'm going to make this a 64 by 64 image here. And then I'm simply just going to set this to be the avatar medium, just like that. Okay, now if I save and press play, you can see we have a 64 by 64 avatar here. And again, if I make this the 128, we're not even going to really notice a difference because this text direct itself is 64 pixels. So that is how we can load in and set our Steam avatar. Thanks for watching.